point in blaming you, you did not know. Oh. I thought you were the one for me. That's why I give you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, I'm gonna do this on my own. No point in blaming you, you did not know. Oh, oh, I'm gonna do this on my own.
Check. What's up, guys? I'm gonna get going just here in a second. Just gonna wait for everyone to get the last minute notifications and hop in the chat, and then we're gonna go. We're gonna do this. Give me like 15 seconds, 30 seconds.
Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh,
You guys can hear me
world to me.
in the chat over the music. All right, let's do this. How we doing? Yes, Saturday. Soul brother. What's up, man? Mike Terry's in the house. This 10K badge. Thanks for being channel supporter, bud. Always appreciate you. Who else we got? Matt Morris. What's up, man? You can hear me. Thank you so much. Thank you. I got this fancy microphone. Hope you can hear me. Oh, what's going on? Switzerland. Let's go. I got to be honest. I do know where Switzerland is. All right. I'm not great with geography, but I do know where Switzerland is. All right. I can't say that. Only the science nerd in me knows where Switzerland is. All right. Let's see who else we got in the chat here. Not any questions right off the bat. We will dive right into this. So first, good evening on this Saturday night. Thanks for joining with us. If you're here live in the chat, if you're listening to this on the playback, well, you can hop in live every once in a while. I'll announce when I do that on Instagram. Tonight, a recap of the Javelina 100. And not just hey, here's my overall view of the race. And it's not going to be all about me. I want this episode to be for somebody that might want to also do this race in the future. A lot of the questions that I had about this race going into it that I wish somebody could just answer for me, logistic things and just gear things like that. I also want to sprinkle in here and there just so everybody that, might want to do it also can have that educational piece. At the first and foremost, I'm always a teacher, right? And if you are live in the chat and any questions you might have or follow-ups to what I say come up, please give those in the chat. After we talk the whole breakdown and what's going on, we will talk about what's next for me. I've been getting that DM a lot. It's like, let me rest. Let me relax for a day or two. But no, we're going to talk about what's next for me and then what's next for 50K Ready as far as the community. I've been thinking about ways to bring the community together, and I think I've come up with something, and we'll talk about that. So I see, in the chat, thank you. And there is a little bit of a delay in the chat too. So please give me like 30 seconds and I'll definitely get to that question as well. You asked based on your training, and I was pretty well prepared. What surprises did you encounter? All right, so first, let's start right from the beginning. Logistics of how I handled this race. I definitely going in, and there's some things that I definitely didn't say before that I can say now in hindsight, or even things I just feel more comfortable talking about now than I did before the race. I think first and foremost, I wish I got a little bit more mileage as far as long runs are concerned. Now, from canyons, and guys, I am a data nerd, so I analyzed all of this data from top to bottom, and I compared canyons with a coach and training for an 18,000 foot elevation change and 22,000 feet of descent. That race going into this race, where it's more going to be heat, and everyone says it's so easy and it's so quote unquote flat. There was definitely a little bit of training differences, and I'll say one of the major differences was for canyons, I ran more miles, definitely. I ran more vert, definitely. I didn't run as many like 26 and up mileage runs. But I had way more in the Canyons block runs between like 20 and 26. So what I found in this block, which I was kind of just trying to figure it out, and it kind of just worked out because I love to race, is I had way more big events. I had way more 50 miles and above. But what I did see, and this is kind of what you hear when you hear people criticize, quote, training races, is that when I did these bigger events, I would have to rest and recover longer. And so that took away from back-to-back weekends and things like that. Now, frankly, I think that both of them fit. And I think for me, what I just did for Javelina was better for me because I struggle with self-confidence and I struggle with the mental side of ultramarathon. But I do build confidence when I get my ass just handed to me. With that said, when I did things like the AT, I got eviscerated. And I really couldn't train for a couple days or weeks after that. Not weeks, a couple days after that. 4 weeks ago, I did a 6-hour race. And I kind of tapered into that because I wanted to perform well. And then I definitely took 2 extra rest days on top of that. So that knocked out a back-to-back weekend. But I then had the confidence of knowing like, man, I ran for 6 hours at 9:08 pace. Like that's a confidence builder that I can't get in a back-to-back weekend of like a 22 and a 24 back-to-back weekend. Some people need that volume. I didn't really need the volume per se. I've been running 50 miles to 80 miles to 100 miles now for over a year. So I knew the volume piece was good, and I knew that my weaknesses were going to come with mental struggles. So I found myself, doing things that I questioned. How long could I run for? This is going to be a flatter type race. I knew it was going to be more running than hiking uphill. Can I run for 6 hours? So I signed up for a 6-hour race. Did it hurt me in the days, or did I get less volume in the days leading up to it and the days after it? Of course, no questions. But for me, that's what worked best. And that's kind of like the beauty of like having a coach and people just that are experienced, even if it's not a coach, having people around you in this space to bounce questions off of. Because I never would have got that from like a generic plan. I never would have gotten that kind of insight from just Googling 100-mile plan that just had volume and things like that. Sometimes you have to analyze the type of athlete that you are. And I'll tell you this, I got into it. What's up, David? I got into it just knowing that a lot of the weaknesses that I had going into Canyons, I had encountered. And I went in with way more confidence into this race than Canyons. Now, I think a little ignorance is bliss into Canyons. Like, I went into Canyons, like listening to my coach. He told me I was ready, but I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't know what I was ready for. At that time, I had never run through the night. Where now going into this race, I have run through the night 5 times. I've seen the sunset and the sunrise 5 different times in 5 different types of events. I have the 100. So I just want to say that I learned that your volume, I always knew that I didn't need to be running 100-mile weeks. I knew that. But I also learned that race specificity and knowing that I can lower my mileage and focus on other things like speed work. I never did speed work for Canyons. I never did because I knew that I just had to like grind. Where this one, I knew I was going to want to push. And, not to give away the ending, but like running in the last 10 miles at 9:30 pace was due to speed work. But with that speed work came way tighter hamstrings during this block. So I needed to lower my mileage. So I just want to just reiterate, and we did talk about this in the live streams leading into it, that mileage is not everything. And I still wish now I would have gotten more mileage, but I'm glad that I learned that I don't need it. So now as I continue to build into future events, I know now that I know the importance of pushing the pace. I know the importance of training races, or at least simulating long, hard grinds, even at the expense of a couple days of training before or after it, if you're that type of athlete. And I know now that I'm going to try and do those things and then build into the higher 80s, 90s, and even 100-mile weeks. I think that's just going to give me even more confidence to continue to succeed. Because before I begin this recap, if there's anything I've learned in the last 2 years now of doing ultras and in the last year of doing 100s, there's no price that you can pay to get experience. And I heard people all the time talk about like, you'll figure that out, or with experience this will come, or with time this will come. Like, you just need to be in situations that you never thought or can't simulate in training, and you need to overcome them in the moment and then look back on them in hindsight and say, I now have that in my tool chest. And the only way you're going to get it is just by jumping into the fire and figuring it out. There were so many times in canyons, and I'll talk about some of them specifically as we get through this. There were so many times, in Javelina, where I called upon canyons, where I called upon the AT, that 6-hour race, SP50. SP50 was in my mind the whole day. Those were days that I just needed experience, and it made me perform so much better at Javelina that now, with the experience and the things and the limits that I found in Javelina, oh my gosh, I was pumped to get back into like racing and things like that. But I think the biggest thing that I'm pumped about now is how much I've learned and how much I know that, even training aside, fitness aside, just knowing what my limits are and then knowing that they can continuously be pushed, that's what I'm most excited about. And I've talked about like the distance doesn't matter. Like, you can train for any distance if you can commit to the training. The distance doesn't matter. And I still have this conversation all the time with the athletes that I coach. It does not matter what distance you're choosing. It matters how committed you are to training for that distance. And I went up big time in my confidence and what I want to accomplish. And that's going to be exciting. That's going to be a whole nother chapter of what 2025 is really going to look like. And these 2 big 100s and possibly one more 100 this year that we will talk about later, 3 100s in a year is going to, I'm going to be ready to run through a wall. It's going to be awesome. And I owe a lot of that to what just happened in Javelina. First, the technical questions of, like, I guess the list of things that I want to know. So if you don't care about me and you're here just to learn about the race, here's like things I wish I would have known going in, or questions that I had going into this race that I now have answered. Number 1, can you wear road shoes? This is a question that I heard talked about in Reddit and other Facebook groups, and I wasn't sure if I was getting gaslighted or whatnot, but you can 100% run this race in road shoes. I would venture to say, because I peep shoes, I would say that 40 to 50% of the people that I saw were either in road shoes or like Hoga Speed Goats. That was like, there was a couple sprinkled in, but there was no shortage of road shoes. There are rocky sections. So the bottoms of my feet were maybe a trail shoe with a stiffer outsole, or like definitely wouldn't need like a carbon plate or anything. That's ridiculous. But like, did the bottoms of my feet get hurt a little bit? But yeah, but I wore Challengers and I wore Speed Goats in canyons and way rocky. Like, your feet are going to hurt. So I don't think that it was like, oh, the bottoms of my feet hurt more or less because I was in road shoes. I wore road shoes. And as far as shoes are concerned, and this is still something that I'm learning, and man, the amount of emotional energy that I spent thinking about shoes going into my first 100, now in hindsight, was insane. It's as simple as this, friends. Find a pair of shoes that don't make your feet hurt. And there is one out there. And it's not your friend's shoe. It's not the shoe that I wear. It's the one that you wear. And unfortunately, guys, you might have to try a couple different shoes. 100-miler is an investment, and you might have to find 4 or 5 shoes before you find the right one. You do not, under any circumstances, need to settle for a shoe that, oh, it's great, but it rubs my pinky toe weird. Or it's great, or sometimes I blister here. Or it's great, but it hurts the outside of my big toe. I know now, because I've said all of those things. I know now that you do not need to settle on a shoe. And I know now that the comfort of a shoe is way more important than the traction and the outsole. It's as simple as that. Because I worried so much about my footing and gripping and what shoe I was going to wear for this 100-mile trail race back in canyons. And you saw the pictures. My toes, they're still really not healed from canyons. And that blister, that was the size of my foot. Guys, after Javelina Jundred, I took my shoes and socks off. I dusted them off. And you would not even know I went for a run. That is because I found a pair of shoes that doesn't hurt my feet at any distance. And I tested them and I trained them in 6-hour races and I trained them in a 50K the 2 weeks before and they never hurt my feet. And I found a pair of socks that I could wear with them, nice Murano wool, and I wore them. And I went up a half size just because I know that my feet are going to swell on 100 and that's that. So if you're curious about Javelina 100, you can. And I would venture to say that most trail races, with the exception of like there's a downpour or it's snowing or something like that, I think a lot of the races you could get away with wearing a really, really solid road shoe. Another thing that I was thinking about or heard about was like you need an ice bandana and you need arm sleeves. You need places to stuff ice. That is also a fact. The people that did not have places to stuff ice definitely suffered significantly more than me. And I suffered pretty badly. I like the $10 or $20 investment in my ice bandana that I thought was going to be a foolish purchase. I've bought in way worse things. That thing was a lifesaver. I could not, I'd probably rock 2 of them if I go back. I'd probably rock 2 of them. And stuffing like down into here in my arm sleeves and just letting it drip down my arm in between aid stations. Yes, you need to have as much of your skin covered and you need to have those things that are covering your skin able to stuff ice if you really, really want to feel okay during those middays. Granted, I got record highs, but that's good. 100 degrees, it's fine. I signed up for a race in the desert. I knew it was going to be hot. I didn't necessarily know how much the heat was going to bang me up, but I knew it was coming and I was prepared for it. Other things that people told me about was like parking in the morning is a poop show. If you're going solo, you might just want to get a tent. If you are going by yourself or with one other person, camp on site in their tent city. I rented a tent from them. It came with 2 cots. I was worried about it being too loud at night. They had quiet hours starting at 8 p.m. And at 8 p.m., that place, they shut the generators off, the lights off, the radios off, the food trucks died. Everything was dead. The place went from 7:50. I was like, oh my God, I'm not sleeping tonight. To 8:05, I was snoring in my bunk. It was incredible. I had a buddy drop me a sleeping bag. If you don't have a sleeping bag, you can rent one from them. Sleeping bag was definitely necessary. It did get cool in my sleeping bag. I slept in like shorts and a t-shirt in the middle of the night, like 3 o'clock in the morning when I got up to pee once. I threw on a long sleeve shirt just to stay a little bit warmer. And then you don't need an alarm because at 4 o'clock in the morning, the place just lightens up. People start showing up and things like that. So that's definitely the way to do it. They had food trucks. I think I had pizza the night before. I guess if you're a picky eater, you might want to bring your dinner. But the way the race is organized from top to bottom going in, it was awesome. Other things I had questions about was like, was the 5 loops going to be annoying or was it going to be hard to go out for 5 loops? It wasn't in a way, but there was one section between Coyote, the first aid station, and the second one, Jackass. It was a tough section. And knowing that section was there each time, that was like, But it was also nice knowing like when I got through that section the last time that I was done with that section. So it wasn't so much the loops. It was just, if you were going to walk around, if you walk through a doorway and every time you go walk through that doorway, you got punched in the face, like you wouldn't not walk through the doorways anymore, but and you'd have to prepare for the fact that you're going to get punched in the face every time you walk through that doorway. That's really how the loops were. So I camped the night before. I got there early, which I'm glad I did. There's a couple of things. I got there at like noon just because I didn't really have any other rides. I took an Uber there, got there at noon on Friday, and I'm glad I was there because I'm glad I saw how hot it was during the day before. And I'm glad that I saw, how much better I felt when I had things covering me. I went for a walk and wore my sun hat and things like that. I also am glad that I was there to see how fast it got cold. There was a part of me that's like, yeah, I lived in Arizona. The sun goes down. It starts to cool off, blah, blah, blah. If I'm out in between aid stations, I'll be fine and make my way back and I'll be fine. That Friday night, I found out that once that sun went down behind the mountains, it went from 90 degrees to 50, 60 degrees quickly. And that if I was wearing wet clothes from soaking myself down all day during that time, I wasn't going to make it the 10 miles back to the aid station without getting really, really cold. So at least I knew that, which was another reason I was glad I stayed there. I'm not a picky eater, so I crushed a really, really big pizza at about 6 o'clock or so. As after the people came and got their bibs, it was pretty much just the people camping, which was awesome too because got to hang out, meet some people. Hoka had, I think they watched Moana or Coco. There was a kids race. There was a beer mile. There was all these fun things to do that pass the time during the day. And yeah, I sleep well the night before. The cot was comfortable and I got to bed. My watch said I was sleeping by 8:30. I was a little jet lagged because I got there the day before. So really it felt like 11:30 to me maybe, but slept well. And then I was up ready to rock at 4:30 in the morning. And as somebody that worries in the morning about logistics, it was very nice to get up and see everybody else scrambling around and just be able to chill out in my sweatpants in my tent and kind of take a nice slow morning. They had a coffee truck there, so I banged out a coffee. I also had a Red Bull because I just I'm a caffeine addict. I had pre-thought out my breakfast, which was just going to be bread, honey, and peanut butter. So I had little packages of peanut butter. I poured on little packages of honey, bang that out. I had a little bit of Tailwind in a shaker bottle just for some extra carbs and calories leading into the race. My buddy Jacob showed up at 6 o'clock. It's so nice to see a familiar face. The dude is an absolute legend. And got to the start line for a 6 a.m. start. And that was pretty much all the morning. And I was feeling really, really good. It was a low stress situation. The flame dancers and just the music, it just made the vibes definitely. You weren't thinking about the race. There was so much to look at. And I guess if you don't deal well with overstimulation, it could be a little bit trippy, but everything out, it was just nice. And then 3, 2, 1, go. And we were off. We started at 6 a.m., so it was still dark, so we started with headlamps. I started towards the back because I was afraid of going out too hard, which statistically I just do. I just don't have any discipline when it comes to that, but I knew that this day I was only going to have heart rate on my watch, so I did not track distance. I did not track time. The only thing I looked at was heart rate. And my goal was to keep my heart rate under 130 for the first loop. Now, starting in the back was a little bit of an issue because there's 1,000 people in this race. Probably 800 of them went off in wave one. And those first couple miles, there was a lot of walking, a lot of just bottlenecks, going up climbs where some people were deciding to walk early, which is fine. So I probably would have started closer to the front. I think if you want to go 24 hours, definitely be in that first third of people. But at the end of the day, not a huge deal with the amount of walking I did anyway. I'm going to be walking then. But it was just, if you get frustrated by that sort of thing, you should definitely go out. I'd heard that's going to happen, and it definitely happens. There's a lot of walking in that first 4 miles, not like a ton, but just the accordion of people stopping and then, and it's single track and it's cacti and you're not going to be jumping off the trail here and getting jabbed with the cacti that early in the morning. So, if that bothered you. Also, too, I'm glad I had a bandana. Everyone talked about 1,000 people running down a dry desert trail. A lot of dust gets kicked up early. It wasn't a problem later in the race, but that first 4 miles where everyone was pretty much single tracked in, I was glad I was able to pull a buff over just to keep some of that dust out. So if you're going to be doing Javelina, definitely think about that as well. I got to share some miles early on with Pam Reed, who has won Badwater back-to-back times way back in the day, 2002, 2003. I had a nice conversation with her. This was our 120th 100-mile race. And she ended up passing me towards the end. So she kicked my ass. And she is not a young woman anymore, but she was steady and consistent. I saw her a bunch of times, and it was definitely a who's who. It was very nice to get lapped by, I got lapped by Dave Roche twice. I think once at 26 miles and then once right before 50 miles. So that was cool, getting lapped by people and just seeing all like the who's who of YouTubers that I've watched forever. Ryan Van Duzer was out there. We saw Hella Good out there. Simon was out there. Just a bunch of people that I've been watching for a long time do YouTube videos, and it was kind of nice just running into them and having some time to share miles as either they were lapping me or we were running together. I planned the first 4 mile section. I knew that I'd be okay as far as water. I went out with 1.5 liters because I wanted to blow through that first aid station at 4 miles. I knew, and I'd heard that first one's pretty crowded and the rest after that are pretty good. I knew I wasn't going to need ice in my bandanas or arm sleeves just yet because the sun wasn't going to be up or high enough in the sky. So I was planning on just blowing that first aid station, and I did. And when we got to 4 miles, the sun was just about coming up. That's where I turned my headlamp off. And then it was the biggest stretch from aid station, just about 7 miles from Coyote to Jackass, which was like this false flat. And I will talk about the flatness of this race. So everyone, that's all I heard about was how flat and easy Javelina is. Guys, it is not. And the people that have raced it never said that. And that made me wary, or at least like caught my attention early on. Like the people that have done this race are not saying it's flat and easy. And no 100 is. And I think when you look at it at paper, you see like 77 or 8,000 feet over 100 miles. You're like 80 feet per mile. Like 80 feet per mile isn't a lot of climbing. But it is not rolling over that whole entire 100 miles. The first 10 miles out, you go up 1,700 feet. Just about 1,800 feet. So on the way out, you're doing 180 feet per mile. Now, somebody that's flat like me, or that I talk to some people from Florida, I live on Long Island, 180 feet per mile is a lot. And it was like a weird 180 feet per mile out to Jackass, where you're not just grinding. There was never like a section where if I was just doing a 20-mile loop, I would ever walk. And that first loop, I did not walk, except for when I had to in the bottleneck situations. But it was enough to just slow you down where you're like, I'm not on flat ground. It was like a false flat kind of, or like it looked like the stock market kind of, where it was like rolling, but it never rolled down as much as you rolled up. So you just kind of kept climbing and climbing. And this was also the part of the course that was the most rocky. And it's also very windy. So like, even though it's a big loop, you're never really going in a straight line for a very long time. So you're doing a lot of S winds, and then you're going up to Jackass. So it's not flat. It's not flat. I mean, it's not like you need poles and you need to grind, but 8,000 feet, if you come from somewhere that's flat, you're going to have to think about that. But please do not think of this race as 80 feet per mile. Think of it as 170 feet per mile. And then if you do that, and I learned that late, the backside coming down 1,800 feet, glorious. Like, so nice. Not only was it downhill on the way back down, but it was like smooth, buttery, like no rocks. Like, you turn your headlamp off and you felt like the amount of times I thought to myself, man, David Roach must have been going 4-minute miles on the way back. It was really that nice. Jackass, aid station, all of the aid station, it is what you hear about. They are a party. There are so many volunteers. You are not going to wait for water. You are not going to wait for a drink. You are not going to wait for ice. There is just people there. And I felt like they were all trail runners. They just knew. They knew if you were looking crappy. They knew if you were looking like you needed food. They knew if you were looking like you needed to sit down for a second. They just knew. And there's something to be said for that. And I've done like these UTMB races where I never felt that. It's one of the biggest letdowns, I feel like. And even I've criticized Aravaipa for Jigga Johnson in the past when we went there, and the aid stations, they were kind of rude and they were like not that nice. This one, they made up for every ultra I've ever done with how awesome the aid stations were. And I'm not just saying that. Like, I'm hard to please, and it was awesome. I mean, later in the race, I had an incident, and like what these people did for me are the reason that I finished. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. I got through the first loop, which is a little bit longer than the other 4. It's 22 miles. And I got through that in 4 hours and 13 minutes. Now, when I came in, Jake kind of looked at me, like, gave me that "you went out too fast" kind of look. And I know my wife even texted him and was like, he's feeling himself. But I told him that I did not go out too hard, and I didn't. My average heart rate on the first loop was in the 120s. It was cool. I moved efficiently. I took videos. Like, that just happened to be my time for the first loop. I think my mistake was thinking that the heat really wasn't going to come until later in the day, because at this time now we're talking it's like 10:30 in the morning. Now, I know in hindsight it got to 90 before that. So when I was coming in from that first loop, it was already 90 degrees. And Jake kind of said, like, dude, pull it back. Like, heat is a slow cook, and you won't know, and you won't know, and then you'll know, and it's too late. And I kind of said, yeah, I kind of get that. And I knew that I'd feel warm. And I went out, and I definitely just stayed consistent. But I said, all right, I'm going to start walking these uphills of the rolling sections. I got to that's the first aid station on the second loop, Coyote. I stopped this time. I filled bottles. I did not stuff ice yet. And now it was about 11 o'clock in the morning. Midway through that long section from Coyote to Jackass was when I started to really feel the heat. And we talked about that question I got earlier, what surprises? I was surprised how hot it got so early in the day. I don't know what made me think, or I guess just looking at the weather or whatnot. Like, I was waiting for that time between like 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. to be the really, really hottest parts of the day, which it was. It was 100 degrees. But I failed to realize that those windows before and after were going to be 95, 96 degrees. So when I got halfway through that second stretch in between Coyote and Jackass, I started to feel the heat. I regretted not putting ice in, and I kind of was like, all right, let's shut it down. Let's be okay here. I got ice in at Jackass, felt so much better. The relief was insane. I was soaking down my arm sleeves, stuffing my arm sleeves, ice bandana, ice in the hat, just pouring water all over me, except just trying to keep my feet dry. And I was drinking a ton. By this point, I'd already drank 5 or 6 liters of water. I was peeing every 90 minutes. Things were good. I was like, all right, I got through that section. I learned my lesson. We're going to do ice the way out. The next aid station was 5 miles. I got there wonderfully. I left that 5-mile aid station, and I took a gel, the gel that I always take, and I threw it up immediately. I never felt nauseous. When it hit my mouth, I wasn't like, ugh, I didn't gag it. I took it. I jogged like 3 steps. I kind of like burped a little bit and was like, that was weird. And then it all came. 3 liters of liquid and the gel. And I was like, I've never thrown up in a race where I wasn't nauseous. Like, it just happened. And I'm like, okay, that was just like a freaky thing. No big deal. And I just started to like, all right, now I just lost 3 liters, or what it felt like 3 liters came out. I was out the nose. It was the whole 9. And I was like, all right, I got to start getting that back in. I'm like, okay, you threw up. I wasn't nauseous. I was still jogging. Good. For the rest of that 4-mile loop, every single time I took a big sip, like I was able to take like a little bird sip, but anytime I took like a full mouth chug, it came right back out, like the same volume, in and out. An hour later, right before I got done with the second loop, I took another gel, in and out. Never felt nauseous. It was so weird. So I got back from that second loop. I said to Jake, like, dude, I don't know what the deal is here. I'm not nauseous. My legs feel good. I'm good emotionally. For whatever reason, though, the stomach is like, I'm offline right now, dude. And, when you start to heat up, And what happens is your body says, we don't want blood for the stomach. Our first priority is to keep you cool. So we're going to take all the blood that you're using to digest and we're going to ship it out and we're going to use it to cool you off. And because I'd been using the sauna, I was a very, very efficient sweater. My body knew how to cool itself down, which I know now in hindsight, if I did not use the sauna, I would not have made it through this race. I really would not have. But I said to him, like, dude, I don't even know. And he's like, you got to go slower. And I'm like, Jake, I've been doing like run walk. Like this was the slow one. This was, I think, 5:30. I went on this loop. So 4:13 and then I went up to 5:30. And I was like, I still want 24 hours. Like that's still a goal of mine. He's like, that's fine. But you need to remember we're waiting for the nighttime. So go out and run a 5-hour loop again, a 5:15, even a 5:30, one more, and then we'll attack the night. I said, dope, dude, we got this. I got to Coyote again, and same thing. Every single time I tried to take a major drink, I threw up. And I was thinking maybe it's the tailwind, maybe I just need something that's a change. So they had Gatorade at that aid station. I took like a quick sip of the Gatorade. It was lemon lime. I know I love lemon lime. Took a quick sip. It was like, all right, it sat pretty good. Once again, not nauseous. I'm not like looking at food being like, I don't know how. And if you've been in the heat or you've been in a bad spot, you've looked at food and been like, I can't even put this towards my mouth. I had no problem. I was like, boom, a little bit of chip, take this, but it just came right back out. So I took one sip and I was like, all right, I'm gonna ditch the tailwind for a little bit. And for this 7-mile section, I'm gonna go Gatorade. I'm gonna fill up my bottles, my 1.5 liters that I have with me with Gatorade. That'll be a switch. Maybe my stomach will be like, okay, dope, we're good. Let's do this. Left there and got about a mile down the trail and tried to take my first big sip of the Gatorade. It didn't taste anything like I remembered. My body was like, this is nope. And that sip now turned my stomach, where I had done a 1.5 loops now, not nauseous, but just throwing up all the time. Now I was nauseous for the first time, and it was the hottest part of the day. And I really started to get worried for the first time. I hadn't peed in 4 or 5 hours. I'd been eating for the last 4 hours, but not keeping anything down for more than a couple minutes. I'd been drinking, but not keeping anything down for a couple minutes. And I knew that this was going to be a bad spot. But I also knew that I only had 3 hours till it got dark. And in my video, I talk about that. I'm like, I'm not feeling great, but I always knew that we were going to attack the night. This is where SP50 came in and really helped me, because at SP50, I didn't think I could be any more hot, any more nauseous, and think I was going to die than I did that day. And I felt exactly the same way at Javelina in the middle of that third loop. And I made it out of SP50. I stayed the course. I kept trying to drink. I kept trying to cool off. And then I felt better and ran. So I was able to say to myself, Brad, if you can get to the night, even if you need to sit here Indian style on the side of the trail until dark comes, you will get better. I was able to call upon that, which was awesome. It didn't get better. Like this nausea turned into dizziness, and I somehow got like the sun started to go down. It was like sun setting as I came into Jackass that third time. And Jackass at night is a rave party. But now you can hear this aid station from 1.5 miles away. I can see the aid station. And at this time, I must have looked like the memes. Like I couldn't walk straight. I was trying to like keep my balance. I was going down to one knee and standing up, like so dizzy. Just the world just spinning and spinning. And I'm like, oh, I just kept trying to take sips and it's spinning. And I got about 1/10 of a mile. I could see it. And I just got down on all fours, and I was like, I might have to crawl this. Like I might have to crawl it in. And then I just started to feel really, really just weird, dude, just weird. So I called Jacob, and I was like, Jake, like I'm not telling you I want to quit. I'm emotionally, I am there. What I'm telling you right now is I think that my body's telling me that I'm done. I said to him, Jake, I'm done. His answer was like, nope, unacceptable, nope. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I'm not trying to quit. He's like, nope. Now I'm on the phone with him, like you can't see. I got an ear pod in, and it's getting dark. People can't see, so they see me like throw. I'm on the phone with them. I'm throwing up, and people are coming by, hearing me talking. To quote myself, I'm like, I'm fine. I'm on the phone. People coming up, rubbing my back for a second. I'm like, they're like, some people are like, dude, the aid station's right there. I'm like, trust me, I know it's right there. I just need a minute. And all of a sudden, like I see headlamps coming up the trail, and I'm like, damn it, they sent somebody for me. And this guy comes up to me and he's like, hey man, like, what's the deal? You throwing up? And at this point I was still talking to Jake. I'm like, Jake, the aid station's here. He's like, dude, if they try and pull you, you have them call me. I'll talk to him. I was like, okay. Because my number one fear is they were going to see how shitty I was, and they were going to be like, no, man, you're good. Like medical was going to make that call for me. So the first thing I started doing was like reading in my resume. Like, dude, I've done this before. I've been in really bad situations. I am good emotionally. I've been drinking. I told them I'd been peeing. I hadn't been peeing. And I was like, to be honest, I need to figure out something to get into my stomach because I'm feeling hungry, which is making me nauseous. But I think if I sit for 20, 30 minutes, I think I'm going to be dope. And he's like, okay. He's like, let's get to your feet. And he walked and he told me a little bit about himself. And like, this was just a volunteer. This was not med. This was just a volunteer that had been in races and been shitty before, and he was going to come really help me out. And he did. And I sat there and I called my wife and I just told her like, hey, I know it's probably been a long time since I checked in on the tracker. I'm going to call you back. I'm going to be fine. I called Jake back and was like, I think I'm going to be okay. I'm trying to nibble on a burger. And like, you will never eat food as slow as possible than in an ultra. Like this burger that usually I can devour in 2 bites, like I can eat. And I was like taking the smallest little nibbles, and I was like taking the smallest little nibbles out of these things. And I got about halfway through that burger and it was staying down. And like I said, now I was starting to feel cool, and I actually like caught a chill, like a little bit of a shiver. And I was talking to this nice young lady, Monica, who was doing the 100K, and she's out on her second loop. And I'm like, I'm on my third loop. And she's like, oh, is this your first 100K? And I'm like, I'm actually doing the 100-miler. I'm 100K in. And we talked for a second. She told me her lows. I told her what I was going through. I was like, we can get through this together. I was like, I'm going to just start walking with this burger. You want to come walk with me? And she's like, I'm not ready to walk yet, but I will. Thank you for the talk. And found out later that she finished, and that's freaking awesome. And started walking on the trail, eating this burger. It was cool. It was dark. Like I said, mentally, I was good the whole day. And I called Taylor Spike, and I was like, sorry, man. Like, I'm just not having that great day that I thought I'd be having, but I'm ready to attack the night. This is a whole new race, a whole new reset. I'm going to walk it for a little bit, and then I told him I'm going to walk 8 miles to a 40-mile race that I'm going to start, because I had 8 miles left in that loop and then 40 more. I said, I'm going to walk and reset for 8 miles, and then I'm going to run a 40-mile race, and we're going to see, because 24 hours was not off the table. This was still like right at 12 and a half hours I was 53 miles in it, like 12 and a half hours. And I finished that burger, and I had 4 miles to the next aid station, and I'm like, we're going to try and jog. And I just started jogging. Legs felt good. And I ended up doing 13:40 pace for those 4 miles to get me to mile 56. I called up Jake. I'm like, I'm going to be there in 4 miles. Tell Christian, who's going to be pacing me, like, we're going to be ready to go. But I'm going to need to sit when I get there again. And now that my stomach is feeling good and I don't have the spins and I'm not like throwing up all the time, like I need to get 2 liters of water in me. And then maybe some more real food. So we got back to my tent, and I got a bunch in. I was ready to rock with Christian. We jogged to Coyote Camp at right around 14-minute pace. He made me sit down and eat some more again. We got some chili in me, which was amazing chili. I filled up with blue Gatorade. I loved it. I had a little bit of Coke, a little bit of caffeine, and I told Christian that we were going to kind of jog in this section that I knew was a little bit brutal for me, and that we'd cook it on the way back, on the way downhill. And I think this is maybe if I did have a low emotional spot. When we left Jackass, for whatever reason, the legs just didn't want to run the way they had been running on that downhill section on the way back. And I got a little discouraged. And I said to him, like, this is not where I should be walking. And he was like, dude, you're good. And I'm like, I think this was the first time that I saw, excuse me, I got to take a drink. I think this was the first time I saw 24 hours kind of dwindling away. And I told myself if that was the case and I ever got to that point in the race, I wouldn't harp on it. And I probably harped on it for like 20 minutes. And then Christian was like, dude, put it behind you, man. With these temperatures, you kind of had to know that it was going to be, need to be a perfect day. And we started to pick up the pace. We jogged. That last loop we did in just under 6 hours, 5:45. And I tell you that because the last loop with Jake was my fastest loop of the 19 milers. We did it in like 5:10. And I went out with Jake, and just the relationship of just knowing somebody and having a friendship out there when you're feeling crappy it's the best. I don't know how people do this solo without pacers. I mean, one day maybe I'll be there, but I think I don't even need to do it as a flex. Like, it's just so much more enjoyable. Like, we are pack animals, and it's nice to be alone. And in those first 3 loops, I spent a lot of time alone. But just to have, especially somebody like Jake, if you ever need a pacer, man, become friends with Jake, because he is just so positive. He's talking to cactuses. Like, he had just got done with Moab, and I told him, like, I don't want any recaps of Moab because we'll save it for Javelina. So for the first hour or so, we just shot the shit about Javelina. We moved, we ran and jogged into Coyote camp, and got through Coyote and filled up our bottles. And I told him the same thing, like, hey man, I want to try and take it easy, and we're going to ship it home. And he's like, I'm going to hold you to that. And I'm like, if you let me kind of walk it up to Jackass, I'm going to run it home. I promise. And with that, we just enjoyed ourselves on that kind of walk hike up to Jackass. The sun came up during this time, so that's where all those pictures of sunrise. We stopped. We took pictures with each other. Like, we just enjoyed each other's company. And we got to Jackass. The sun was up, and he's like, okay, do you want to put yourself in a situation where you need to get that ice bandana out, or are we gonna do this? I said, Jake, we're gonna do this. I was like, we're gonna start slow, and I am a little bit competitive. I'm like, what I want you to do is I want you to remind me that we're gonna pick up the pace as we go. We're gonna treat the last. We're just trying to get the next aid station, 4 miles, 4.5 miles, as a progression run, and just ease me into it. And find somebody, give me a look, like, we need to do this, and let's just start, trying to pick some people off. I mean, it's a race. I'm allowed to say that. I wanted to pass people. I wanted to pass all those people that passed me for the last 2 loops, or as many of them as I can, because it's a race, and I'm still competitive. So we started, and we were bopping along maybe like 13:30s, and my legs just started to feel good. This was the first, and here's something I'm going to take with me. This was the first time I told my legs, shut up, we're running. And I've heard people say it, and I thought before, I'd said it before. I'd never said it. I'd never said it before and really meant it. My legs were hurting. I mean, we've been out there for 80 miles, 85. Actually, no, we were at mile 90. Like, my legs were hurting. And man, quickly 13s became 12s, became 10s, became 9s. And when we got to 10-minute pace, about a mile in, took me about a mile to ease into it, he handed me, or took out one of his earbuds and held it out to me. And here's where experience comes in. When I was feeling like I was going to crawl on the side of the AT and die, he said, hey, here's one of my headphones. Put it in. Let's at least listen to the same music, and let's just try and enjoy it. And he had made a playlist of all the stuff that he knows just fires me up. This is like a true pacer. Like, made a playlist just for this moment. And like, he held out this ear pod like it was my savior. And when I put this thing in, and I heard hard, obnoxious, evil EDM dubstep, like just the way I like it, a switch just flicked. And yeah, we sent it. And for the next 2 miles, we ran around 8:30s, maybe 9-minute pace. And every time I was like, that was good. Every time I felt proud of myself and I was like, that was good enough. I give myself a walk break. There was somebody else in the distance and he would look back and he would go like this. And you have to be on the live stream to know, but he cocked that gun and he pointed ahead and looked back to me and he's like, there's another one we're taking. There's another one we're taking. And there was a big group that we passed and I heard one of them be like, oh, can we hop on the train? And I was like, hop on. And like, you heard them start to shuffle their feet. And I kind of said to Jacob, drop them. He looked back and saw me say, drop them. And he just took off. And for like a half a mile, we ran in the low 8s, high 7s. And I just could not believe it. And I was feeding off the music, the moment, the emotions of finishing. And I got to be honest, passing people. And when we had got to that last aid station, I knew what the last 4 miles looked like. I'd done it 3 times already. And I knew that if I stopped at that aid station, I would lose all the mojo. I was so proud of myself. I just ran for 5 miles at 9-minute pace. Like, it took us 3 hours to get to Jackass, and we just got back here in 45 minutes, and I was like, this is just, I said to Jake, below this aid station. And he's like, are you sure? Like, do you have water? Like, I don't want to hit rock bottom here with 2 miles to go and you got to crawl it in. I was like, I got a backup bottle. I'm good. Like, I'm not hungry. If I get hungry, I'll make it back. If we can run like this for the last 3.7 miles, we're done in 35, 40 minutes. And that's what we're going to do. And, we blew that aid station. There was probably 15 people sitting at that aid station. Blew through there. They were looking like we were crazy. We didn't jog through there. We ran through there. we ran through there and got in, and then I could hear the finish line. I could hear the music, and that just motivated me even more. Got to the top of the hill. I was able to take my vest off. I knew I'd come back and get it. Taking that vest off, I felt 1,000,000 pounds lighter. And that last quarter to a half a mile that you have to run through the whole tent city and everybody's aid stations. And a lot of the tents were gone. A lot of people were done. But I just got hit with that emotion. And yeah, I finished in 27:33. So I got myself over a 5-hour PR from Canyons. And I don't know in hindsight if even without the nausea and the things, I don't know if I was a 24-hour guy. I don't know. I don't know if I was a 24-hour guy, and I'm okay with that. We'll never know. I'm not going back. I'm not going back to race it. There's too many other amazing races I want to do, and training for these takes a lot of time. And I also wouldn't go in unless I wanted to. Like, I wouldn't just hop into it. I would gladly crew it. I would gladly do the 100K. If somebody in my life wanted to do the 100-miler, I'd probably do the 100K. I would love to be back at the race as a spectator. Like, it was an amazing time. But I personally, unless I'm 60 years old and I've done every race I want to do and I want to come back, I'm never going to go sub 24 at Javelina. But I will go sub 24 in a 100, possibly soon. But that will lead me into the last part of this podcast where we'll talk about what's next. I got done with the race. Jake helped me clean up my tent. I got to the airport. I finished at 9:30 in the morning. I showered at his hotel. He had late checkout till 11. We left his his hotel at 11. I got to the airport at 12 noon. My flight was at 10:30, so I spent 10:30. I spent 10 and a half hours in the airport just kind of sleeping on the floor and just finding a comfortable spot and trying to eat and drink. I caught the red eye back to New York. I landed at 5:55 in JFK. I got to my car. I put on my work clothes, and I was back in school first period Monday morning. And taught all day Monday. And in this week, I have felt physically insane. I said to a couple people, I'm almost embarrassed how good I feel. Talked about my feet, 0 issues. I took off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday just because I could. I rode bikes with my kids. I took my dogs for walks. I slept in. I came home from work and laid on the couch. Like, did all the stuff I've wanted to do for the last year. Because, I went from canyons right into this. They were 6 months apart to the day. I recovered from canyons for a little bit. I just looked today. The week after canyons, I ran 35 miles and then went right up to 50. So I really just wanted to do nothing. And I went into Central Park to meet Jacob, who's running the New York City Marathon tomorrow. And we did a nice 7-mile loop through Central Park. I feel incredible. I went out for a longer run today. Incredible. And I think that's a lot to the training that I did and having a good training block and my muscles being ready. But yeah, it was dope. It was everything that I wanted and more out of a race. And I got everything that I wanted except for that sub 24. But, when you set really, really high extreme goals for yourself, you have to leave room for failure. And this race being a 46% DNF rate, where it usually averages between 30 and 35%, so 15% higher DNF rate, which means that out of the 900 people that finished, only 450 or so got to the line, and I was one of them, and I was pretty mid-pack. I got to be happy with that, and I really, really am. And I think other things that surprised me was how much I missed my wife not being there on my crew. And the fact that I really did think that I could do it alone. Like if Jacob wouldn't have showed up, it would have been a lot harder. If Christian wasn't there, I don't know if I would have made it. So I definitely am never going to downplay the importance of a strong crew. It doesn't need to be 100 people. It could be one person, but I think it's a different breed for the people that go out and try and do these. And I just don't see why early on in your ultramarathon career, you should be doing that. So next, before I move into what's next, I know there's a couple people still here watching live in the live stream. If you have any questions about the race, please drop them in there, and I will definitely, I'll definitely get to them. In the chat, what a feeling sitting in the airport knowing that these people around you have no idea what you just did. That, yeah. I mean, I definitely, I brought a belt. I brought an empty belt, knowing that I wanted to put a buckle on it. And I will say that as I laid there on the floor, I don't usually tuck T-shirts in, but I definitely had a front tuck. So anybody that walked by, even if they don't know what it is, they would at least say, what the hell is on there? But yeah, I was definitely wobbling that day. The airport shuttle guy was like, did you hurt your foot, man? Is your foot hurt? I'm like, dude, is my foot hurt? Yeah, you can say that. My foot's pretty hurt. And I explained to him what I did. And he's like, damn. But that is even going into work, like Monday morning when I got to work, and it's the same, walk through the building, you see your principal, you say good morning, you stop in the cafeteria, grab your cup of coffee. And I mean, I'm not really a social guy. I'm kind of like an introvert, and that's why I talk to cameras alone. And so, a couple people know that I'm into it, but they don't really understand. But my students, they couldn't care less. 17-year-olds couldn't care less what old Finn is doing. They hate me because I'm trying to ruin their life, right? So I think harder than the airport was kind of like trying not to waddle through work, but on the same token, like wanting to waddle through work so somebody could be like, "Are you all right, man? You looks like you're limping around." And I could just be like, "Oh yeah, long race, really, really long race this weekend. I'm just a little sore." And have them be like, "Oh, would you do a marathon?" It's like, nah, I did 4 of them. Yeah, I did 4 of them back to back to back to back to back, in 100 degrees, exposed in the desert. Which I will say too, that's a good, now that I just talked myself into that. Thanks for the question. If there's more questions or comments, please leave them in there. The heat was one thing, but the exposure to the sun was another thing. Like in canyons, it was hot, but you were in the woods. So like it felt hot, you were sweating, but the blazing sun on you wasn't there in canyons. Where this was just relentless sun in your face for the entire time. It was just sun. There was no way to hide from it. It was just sun. And I think I kind of knew that was going to be the case. I knew it was exposed, which is why there's not enough sunscreen you can put on yourself. There's not. You need to be covering your skin in the appropriate clothing. I'm not saying you're wearing jackets, but I'm wearing sun sleeves, I'm wearing sun hats, I'm wearing UV light colored shirts. And I think that even more than the heat was just the exposure. Because even when you're feeling crappy, you can always maybe find some shade and it's hot. And it was so dry too that like you wouldn't really be dripping sweat. The ice cubes were dripping, but like it was hard to monitor sweat and things like that. But yeah, please ask me about my buckle. Oh, this buckle? Yeah, you want to know about it? David Henderson said, I'm on a break. Getting hit by a car has taken longer to recover than I wanted. We'll be doing a mile a day here soon. Ultra by the end of next year. Right on, man. And like I said, that I'm glad you're, recovering from that. That's brutal. It's crappy. I can't even imagine. But I'm out there. I'm fighting for you. I'll keep running those miles for you until you can get back in there. And a mile a day is awesome. The Ultra Jogger podcast that I just did, I talked about run streaks and how run streaks can be great to get consistency back after a long break. And I hope that really does work out. And, I look forward to seeing what kind of race you're going to be doing next. It's going to be awesome. And I know when you do race, you hammer. So good for you, man. And I'm rooting for you. So what's next? I want to say that I'm going to shut it down, but I can't. I just don't have it in me. Whether it's my fear of losing fitness or just really loving this so much, I am going to do a backyard ultra on December 14th here on Long Island. I did it last year. I got 50 miles and then shut it down. It's the one that Jake won last year. If you are in the tri-state or you want to get up to it, I think the furthest 50K ready guy, Nate's going to come up from, I think he's Maryland. He's going to come up and race. I'll probably have a pasta party at the house or something the night before. But we have every intention of getting 100 miles. Like there's one thing if you're going to come out and you're going to run and you're going to PR distance. Ultra marathons backyard ultras are an amazing place to hit PR distances. The amount of people that hit PR distances in backyard ultras, it's incredible. But if you plan to try and win, I'm saying this to everybody that listens to this, you better be ready or have at least 150 miles in you. And I'm not saying I'll be the one to get 150 miles, but I'm saying it right now. I'm going to get 100. I'm going to get at least 100. And me and Jake we're a good team. We are a good team, and the squad that's coming from 50K ready is just going to make it stronger. I mean, Nate, dog. Bucky, Jordan Buck, dog. Spencer, dog. All these guys coming that are going to be a part of this race, and we're going to be there supporting one another and getting each other out. I don't know who it's going to be. Whether it's going to be me or whether it's going to be Bucky or whether it's going to be Jake. Like 50K ready is taking it home. Somebody from our squad is going to be taking down that 100-mile race. And to get 100 miles, you need to do 100 miles in less than 24 hours. That's how the distance was created, if you don't know that. That weird 4.12 whatever. The pace is 100 miles in 24 hours. So not only do I want to get to 100 miles because I want to do well in this event, I want to get to 100 miles because that will also check my box of getting 100 in 24 hours, getting 100 in 24 hours or less. But do not get it twisted. We are not going out there to have a good time. We're going out there to win. We're going out there to win. And Jake might not say it. I'll say it for him. Sorry, Jake, but we are going out there to win. And I don't care if it's me or if it's Bucky or if it's Jake or if it's Nate or if it's one of you guys that wants to come race. It's going to be a 50K ready guy. That's it. That's what it's going to have to be. It's going to be a 50K ready guy. And that's going to be the major focus. Now, kind of the announcement piece. I don't know what 100 I'm going to race next year. I'm entering lotteries. Western State's not going to hit that. Hard Rock, definitely not going to hit that. Leadville, maybe. Might. I have a better chance of getting into Leadville. That's kind of the one I want to do the most. So if I have like an A that I'm hoping to get into, it's Leadville. And Leadville is also one of those where if I don't get in, I'd be open to doing a charity to get in because it's just a good timing of the year with my school schedule and things like that. And I can go out there and bring the family and bring the kids and do my big summer trip. You guys know I did Montana last year. I could do my big summer trip up there and get ready for Leadville. That's kind of the one I want to hit. And then the last one is UTMB. I'm going to enter that lottery. Until all those lotteries clear, I really won't know. If I don't hit any of those lotteries, I'll either focus on an Ironman and I'll crush Ironman. I'll focus on a High Rocks and maybe do that for a year. Or maybe like a Run Rabbit Run or support my wife in a really, really long race. We'll see. So we have to get through the lottery season through December to know exactly what I'm going to be doing. But I am signed up for and definitely 100% going to be doing a 50K on April 13th. It's the anniversary of my older brother's death. And it is the first ultra marathon that I ever did shore to shore. It is from the North Shore of Long Island down to the South Shore. It's run by a company, Happily Running, and just a great race. It starts off a little bit hilly, not a ton of elevation. It's on our greenway, so it's mostly on trails, a couple of road crossings. But what I'm going to do, and all of like this information I will post in the description, and it's also at my website, 50kready.com/50K will bring you right to the page. I am going to do like a mentorship, like team, like almost like a marathon or 50K team leading into that event. So essentially what I want to do is, and this was really brought on by the people that I'm coaching that were like, hey, could we get like a private Facebook group or something just so we can chat and bounce ideas off of each other? And I've been wanting to do that. What I'm going to do is I am going to post to this group my entire training plan. I am also going to vary or adjust that training plan to your heart rate zones and your pace zones. So we will do this training block together. So if you pick a spring race anytime in April, you'll pretty much be lined up with us, even early May. Or if you want to come up to New York and do this race with all of us, I'm going to post those workouts. If you have a smartwatch, I'm going to link you through Training Peaks. All of the workouts will be sent to your watch. They will be sent to Training Peaks. I will be able to give you feedback. I will be able to give you advice. We'll be able to work through all of these things together. On top of that, we will be able to get into a private, either a Discord or a Facebook, Strava type group that we as a community can ask each other questions. Hey, what are you eating? What are you drinking? What shoes are you wearing? What kit do you use? What vest do you have? What poles do you have? All these other things. And we can use each other to get through the winter and dominate early spring races. And for the 16-week program, that's what my block is going to be, 16 weeks. That's going to start on December 23rd. So that gives everyone like a little through November and into early December to either come out and do this backyard ultra or start building some mileage and then hammer it like right into Christmas and say, hey, listen, I'm committed and I'm going to commit through Christmas, through New Year's, through the winter, and I'm going to come into April just being an absolute savage because that's my goal. So if you hop on my team, that's what we're all going to do. And I'm excited. I don't know how many people I'll open it up to. I want to say maybe like 10 or 20 people. I think that would be good enough. And then with 10 or 20 people, we can get some merch, we can get a team kit and things like that. And we can just support each other wherever your race is. So all the details for that, like how to contact me, and I can send you all the links and everything. Like I said, it's going to be on 50kready.com/50K. You can read all of those details again and any other details I might have missed. You can click that link. It'll send me an email, and I'll get back to you right away. If you have any questions about Training Peaks or how much mileage you're going to need going into it, pretty much at the beginning of that 16 weeks, if you can run 30 to 35 miles pretty consistently, you'll be ready for a week run and you'll be ready to dominate. And the most mileage I'll get you up to, we'll probably try and get to about 50 miles on a week. During that 50 miles, there will be time cuts. So my training programs are always built on time, heart rate, and pace, depending on what the workout is. So I say 50 miles would be like the cap for the mileage, but I will be capping long runs. So depending on what your pace is, your most miles, maybe 42 miles, maybe 45, might be 49. It's going to be roughly 50. So if you're interested in that, or you don't know how to use a website, you can also DM me on Instagram, and I'm going to start posting it about Instagram. I just built that web page today and everything. So you guys here in the live stream are going to be the first ones to hear about it even before this episode goes live to playback. So that's really everything I have tonight. I appreciate you guys so much. This is after the fact, but anybody doing the New York City Marathon, it's an amazing day. I hope you have an amazing day. The weather looks absolutely perfect. I could not be happier. Thank you for the support through this block into Javelina. I apologize, and I'm sorry that I didn't get 24 like I said I would. A little bit of pie in my face, but I think I said last week that nobody really cares but me, I'm sure. And I said that the number one goal was to finish that race and not be by the campfire drinking a whiskey or drinking a beer, because sobriety is my number one success. It is my greatest success. And it is the only reason that I'm able to do any of these things. And yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. I will catch you next week. We are still going to continue episodes as we lead into the training for 100-mile finish over at the SRC Backyard Ultra. All right. Look that up if you're in the tri-state or you want to come up to New York. SRC Backyard Ultra. All right, guys. Take it easy.